Stage Works Live. We believe it, and I hope you do too. I'm glad you're with us. It is a beautiful day in the neighborhood, yes, in the state of Iowa, in the first in the nation caucus state. And it's been a little while since we did a caucus talk. It's happening. That's a thing. It, as Ron Paul said, it's happening. That intro is just for our special guest today. You know him, you love him. Cultural commentator, aspiring metaphysician, homeschool kid made good, local leader, dedicated husband and father.
That was a lot of titles.
You've done all the things.
Wow.
You're a Renaissance man, Joel Kurtinitis.
I'll take it.
Well, I'm pleased that you've carved out time in your busy schedule to give us your assessment of the caucuses and where we stand. For people that are listening all across the country and the world, we're very big in Russia right now. And I'm not sure why. I'm sure they're listening for state secrets and I have none. But we do have a special insight to who's going to be the leader of the free world. So I suppose that's where our insights lie. That's what they're hoping to get out of it. And Joel, I know you have your ear to the ground in a lot of the political realms. You have decided that Ron DeSantis is your preference and is your pick for the caucus, right?
Right. Yeah. And it's good to lead off with that because I'm not entirely unbiased. I feel like I do my best to keep my analysis apart from my preferences, but you know, I'm human.
Yeah, well, it's your truth, and we're all just living in it. Right?
Brutal.
No, I think it's important to state that at the outset, as you said, but I know that you're able to that you would tell the truth, no matter what, based on what you see. Not just what you prefer to be true, because that's what we're about here on the show. We believe there is such a thing as objective truth. It is knowable, and we're also obligated to it. Like we have some responsibility to live our life in the truth in relationship to the truth. So laying all cards out on the table is very important. I respect that. Now here, it's obviously the great state get together, the Iowa State Fair. And that's always a huge place. I was trying to explain that to, it was the head of Moms for Liberty, and she's from Florida. And everyone's saying, you need to come back for the state fair. You've got to come to the state fair. And she's like, why on earth would I come here for the state fair? Let me give you the Iowa translation, the Iowa breakdown. Every presidential candidate, everyone that has ever thought about wanting to be president, they hang out at the state fair. There is a corn poll done with corn kernels, which is the most scientific way to do a poll. And there's a popularity contest, and they're shaking hands and they're doing selfies. And that's how we roll here in Iowa. So it was funny to have to explain that kind of an outsider's perspective. We are unique here and we love it. So thank you very much.
And so you know I'm originally from Florida. And so I've got a dose of relatability with that, because when we moved up here, we started hearing about the state fair from everyone too. This is before I was really directly engaged in politics. And for the life of me, you know, moving up from Florida, I'm thinking, do they even have a Disney World? Like, do they know what Universal Studios is? You know, like what, the SeaWorld at least?
No,
something?
We don't need it. Shut up.
Oh, you have corn dogs. That's exciting. You know,
I've heard people that I didn't even know were running for president or making an appearance.
Oh, there's always some of those around. You're bound to run into a few. That should be a scavenger hunt at the fair, honestly. And
the name that immediately jumped into my mind was Doug Burnham.
If there was ever a guy who had the last name completely custom fitted for a slogan, that would be the guy, right? Burn him down. There we go. Burn him down with Burnham. I mean, he's got everything in that corner already locked up. So who knows? Maybe he's the dark horse.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know anything about him.
Independent research. Better do some research.
Yes, I will. I am seeing a lot more ads. It's the last conversation that we had, Joel, that we were talking about how it feels very different this year. And that it doesn't seem like there's all the time in the world for the traditional Iowa caucus goer to just kind of meander around and make up their mind and collect the autographs and I'll hear what he has to say and what she has to say. That seems like that dynamic is much more truncated, that the schedule is much more compact, that people have either made up their minds or they're deciding whether or not it's even worth it to participate.
Well, I have to change your terminology there a little bit to truncated.
Oh,
because that's a dad
joke there.
That's you can throw that on the titles next time you intro me. You know, you just throw that on the titles. Dad joke expert. That's the elephant in the room, right? It's Donald Trump, and all of this is about who is going to be the contender that could wrap up a potential nomination challenge to the prohibitive front runner right now, which is President Trump. That's what's compressing this timeline, is that, we've seen in past cycles where the conservative vote in particular tends to get just fragmented and splintered for a long time. And that allows a more moderate contender typically to hold their faithful 33% to 40%, and then just allow that to carry them all the way through, even though it's a minority. And so this time, I think conservatives, hopefully, at least some, have learned our lesson from prior cycles and are now looking and saying, how can we get momentum on our side built sooner, being that there is that solid block that's already behind one candidate and is not likely to move.
I understand the strategy behind that. In fact, I've been advocating the strategy. Somebody needs to talk to everybody in the race and be like, if you're a real conservative, in contrast to the milquetoast moderate rhino in fancy suit over there, no, thank you. Like, we need someone who's actually going to turn to right the ship. There is this feeling among most of the people that I talk to that things are going down the tubes. There is kind of this doom and gloom, like this is the last gasp of American freedom. This is the last opportunity we might have to save this. Now, that often happens in elections. And so I've heard that rhetoric. It's every election of my life has been the most important election of my life. So I hear that all the time. This time it may be true. We'll see how well my predictions bear out. Getting back to where Iowa stands, you mentioned that kind of third. You can almost just skate to the nomination by just getting a solid third of support if the other 2/3 of Republican primary voters are subdivided 5, 10, 15 different ways. That's usually why the early states are so important as well, because not because we always determine who's going to be president, but who won't be. If you don't make it at least in the top 5 in Iowa and in New Hampshire, by the time you get to South Carolina, almost everybody else drops out. And usually you just see like 2 or 3 people by that point vying for the nomination. So you're pretty sure who it's going to be. Candidate Trump in 2015 and 2016 received about 1/3 of the caucus vote. It was Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio and Donald Trump. And it was basically split 3 ways, more or less, and then a few down ballot options. And that was enough to keep him in the race. And then in South Carolina, had really laid the ground game, and he just kind of sailed away with it from there. And he was the heir presumptive from that point. I wonder if we're going to see the same thing this time. Do you think that's something that seems like a path for victory?
I see one really big distinction that makes the whole analysis messy. And that is that Donald Trump has never put together and still does not put together traditional coalitions. These are not traditional coalitions. This is not, we used to have our neat little boxes. Christian conservatives, you got the evangelical vote, you've got the libertarian vote, you've got the national security vote, and you've got all these little boxes, the corporate Republican vote, the country clubbers. But Trump really pulled a lot of those disparate groups that have never been in the same room before, pulled a lot of them together, some for the right reasons, some for all the wrong reasons. I mean, there's a lot of opportunists who have latched onto Trump and his campaign as well. But that shakes up the analytical framework that we've used for years and years. And that's why, to me, trying to be reactive in this primary cycle may be a mistake for people who do believe that this is a critically important juncture in American history and that we need to be active in choosing a nominee that's going to represent us well. I don't know that we have time to be reactive. He's a president. It's President Trump, not Senator Trump, not Governor Trump. I mean, that automatically is just a huge boost to him. And so in comparing it and contrasting it to former cycles, this is a new animal that we're looking at right now. And so that while the components may still be there still may be that path to victory. It's going to look different. And there's going to be people that you would not expect to see on opposite sides of it.
Right. And that's very true. There is a diehard level of loyalty among many people, and probably many people listening right now. You're like, he's my guy. And I never had any question, and it doesn't matter. You can't tell me anything that's going to shake me on that. And God bless you. I'm glad. Unless it reaches the level of idolatrous worship, in which case, no, we got a problem. We got to talk. Jesus Christ is the savior. And that's it. And we don't look to any other human being as a political savior. That's not the way that this works. As long as we all agree on the same page on that. Politically speaking, I understand why there's an appeal. I really do, for Donald Trump. And I have given him an awful lot of credit. Wow, Donald Trump accomplished a lot. He really did. He did. There was a lot of pro-life victory. There was a lot of, again, economic boom during his time. The average person, I think their life improved under Donald Trump, especially in comparison to Joe Biden. However, there's an awful lot of people that are out there that don't see it that way. And so what I'm trying to compare is the level of loyalty among Trump's diehard fans. And is that base growing or shrinking, which is where we are now? Because we're not dealing with, like you said, we're not dealing with 2016 Trump. We're dealing with 2020 and the aftermath thereof. And now we're in 2024. This feeling among a lot of people who are kind of holding out, at least the folks that are talking to me, and they're like, yeah, I really appreciate what he did, but there's so much other baggage, that so much has happened in the last 3-4 years. I wish that there was something else. And they're still waiting on somebody else to impress them and be the one person that can stand up to, megalodon that is Donald Trump on a debate stage.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the kids have been talking about Pokemon, so maybe that's in my head. I choose you. You got to go up against Donald Trump and then Joe Biden. But the question is, with Trump's unfavorables, which are also higher than anybody else's, and everybody knows his sins full well. Like, they know his feet of clay. And there are people that love him in spite of that, because of that. But I don't know if he's able to grow enough base for the general election either, which is also something that is worth considering if you want to vote strategically.
Right. And, Trump's side would do well to remember that this does come down to the Electoral College still. It's not just a popular vote. That's not how we elect presidents. Big crowds at rallies, that's not going to win you the White House. Good standings in any given poll, that's not going to win you the White House. This is not how the game is played. And they should know that, because that's what carried it for Trump in 2016. These Rust Belt states that nobody expected to vote for Trump, and then they did. Just looking at their state politics over the last couple of years, I don't see it happening again. You've got Michigan and Wisconsin, places like that where a lot of auto workers and blue collar folks came out in support of Trump. These are the places that are now doing away with all abortion restrictions and lunging heavily left, to suggest that that's going to reverse itself in a presidential cycle and come back in Trump's favor. I find it pretty hard to imagine how those numbers are going to work out personally. And I don't see where he's going to string together the victories, particularly if, as he and his folks do, you presume that the election is not going to be fair to start with. So if that's the presumption going into it, and you know that you don't likely have the margin in those states, I'd like to see a pathway to victory there outlined by Team Trump. And I haven't really seen that. I've seen a lot of, well, look how many people showed up in the stadium to hear him speak. Well, Ron Paul did that too, but he wasn't able to convert that into a White House victory.
The speech that I just heard Donald Trump give in New Hampshire was a rally speech. I found myself asking that out loud at the screen. He was talking about the election. We have to win. We have to win this election. And then in the same breath, he's saying it was a rigged election, the 2020. Now we've got a tale of two elections, right? He's trying to look forward and say, we're going to win this next one. We've got to win this next one. But we did win the last one, and I'm still not president. We did win, but it was rigged. It was the most crooked election of our lifetimes. I always believe there was never a time when I didn't believe that I won the election. It was unfair. They stole it. And don't have a great Trump impression, but you get the point. To me, it's like the gas and the brake pedal at the same time and expecting the car not to blow up eventually. Like, that doesn't make the car go. All the things that Trump has said, both literally and hyperbolically, but now we've got to win this one. How? That was my question. How are you going to do that?
For a guy that makes his absolute career on constant superlative language and hyperbole, nobody, I will give him this superlative, okay? Nobody is able to say contradictory things on a stage in one sentence and have people applaud it and cheer for it like Donald Trump. He is the best at that. I will pin that badge right on him. He is the absolute best at it. He says contradictory things, makes contradictory messages, but it kind of doesn't matter, because that's in the regular parlance and blue collar world, that's just real talk. And
and he means it both times.
Right. He means it both times. Exactly.
Both times.
Because he sounds like your neighbor from down the street who's 4 beers in, and like that's what it sounds like. So when I look at that, I see a lot of good accomplishments there from his presidency, a lot of reasons behind that. But there's a huge weakness here that could be exploited if we had a candidate who was actually willing to exploit it. And I haven't seen that yet, really. And I know it's early, the debates are still coming and there's going to be opportunity, but just presenting that direct challenge to his messaging, calling out some of the absurdity. And I get it, because we've been through another cycle where somebody tried to call out his absurdity, and before you know it, he was accusing people of the JFK assassination and just wild, outlandish stuff. So I get you don't want to invite that pain before you have to, but it's coming. It's coming for whoever rises to the top of this kind of secondary field of candidates. So I think there needs to be a plan in place for that. And I'd like to see some of that messaging start to work its way to the top.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we haven't even talked about the real juicy stuff, which is all the multiple indictments that he has collected. He becomes more popular the more he is indicted. And again, I get it. I get the appeal. He's become the target. And where Trump was always best is when he was saying, I'm here to represent you. Right. And that's what I'm for. It's not about where he's the worst is when it's all about him. He has to make that turnaround. And I've heard him do that. And I think that is effective for his audience. In fact, in this speech in New Hampshire, he did that as well. He said, when we win this, we're all going to be the president. It's going to be you and me. We will be the president of the United States, which grammar notwithstanding, that's where he's his most effective, is saying, I'm here, I'm representing you, I'm taking the slings and arrows that the left wants to destroy. This is why they hate me, is because I represent you and I stand for you, and nobody else will do that. Nobody else can stand up to them like I can. I'm the tough, I'm the winner, I always win. It's effective for him. So my main question is, how are you going to do that electorally? Because it didn't work last time. So what's different this time? Like, seriously, what's your strategy to overcome what you say is the systemic corruption that caused the election to be, quote unquote, stolen from you this last time? And how are you going to overcome that strategically when it's all the same people that are in place? And the numbers have shifted even more in favor of the Democrats, actually, is if you go by the results of the last midterms. That on top of the legal brouhaha that he finds himself in, where he is going to be literally going back and forth from a plane to a courtroom to be arraigned, and then go on a plane to another state and another set of lawyers on another set of. I've never seen this before. I've never seen it before. I don't know how you effectively run for president, even just at the best of times. It's a hard thing to do and a hard schedule to keep up with. How on earth are you going to do that and then fight back against all the challenges that will come your way? I don't know. I mean, he must be Superman if he can do that.
Well, don't give him any ideas. But there is, I mean, so you were talking about strategy, and it's odd to hear Trump and strategy in a single sentence. But I think there is a strategy at play here. What I worry about, and what, a lot of other prominent conservatives are worrying about right now, is that it may not be Trump's strategy. It may be the Democrats' strategy. This would be their ideal. I mean, Biden's made it really clear that he wants to run against Trump again, that he's not at all afraid electorally of going up against Trump. He hasn't said that about anyone else. And, regardless of whether you think that was sensible or not, it's clear that they believe that they have victory locked up if Trump's the nominee. The fact that they believe it gives them an incentive to put their thumb on the scale of the nomination process, however possible, to get Trump in there, because they believe he is eminently defeatable. And so when I see this kind of slow drip of indictments, some of which are just bizarre and unsubstantiated, and are going to be impossible to prove in court, it doesn't look like the justice system playing out as normal anymore. What it looks like is tampering with the process by controlling the headlines, but not controlling them, creating the headlines, because there is a predictable and well-documented effect with Trump in which the more he is persecuted, the more popular he is with his base. If I'm a number cruncher on the Democratic side, this is a no-brainer. Just keep dripping the indictments long enough to get him through the nomination, and then we're home free. And I think that's the concern, is that there is a strategy playing out here. I don't think it's his.
Well, let's talk about what it could look like then if there's an alternative. And I know we haven't taken a break yet, Ron. I'm sorry. Let's do that now. Let's take a break. We're going to reset. We're doing some caucus talk, the way we see the lay of the land as it is right here, and as the presidential candidates descend on our state for the state fair, and all the selfies that will ensue. We're just getting warmed up. We'll come back with more caucus talk here on FaithWorks Live. There's no better time than now to stand for life. And you can stand with Iowa's original pro-life organization, Pulse for Life. They're the longest standing nonprofit pro-life organization in Iowa, and they're dedicated to informing, educating, and inspiring a new generation to value the sanctity of all human life, from fertilization until natural death. They serve at the State House. They educate in classrooms, at events. They proudly serve on the coalition of pro-life leaders. They are on the front lines of
the battle against this throwaway culture of death that we see all around us, and we are winning ground. Hearts and minds are changing, and the pro-life movement is continuing to grow. And you can be a part of the exciting things that are happening right here in our own backyard at pulseforlife.org and get your finger on the pro-life pulse. Sign up for their newsletter, find ways that you can make a difference, and how you can change hearts and minds with their pro-life apologetics course, pulseforlife.org. You know how much we love Animus beef at the Haynie house. It is delicious. It's wonderful quality. It's naturally raised with no steroids, antibiotics, and they just do what they do so well. High quality beef at the Animus farm. But did you know you can actually see where your beef comes from? You can visit Animus farm. The fine folks, Dave and Mary Lynn, are the most hospitable folks I may have ever met. They'll let you feed a bottle calf and then meet the cows at Animus farm. And opening soon is a special treat, Mulberry Cottage, for a stay at the Animus farm. It's a family-oriented getaway, and they'll let you hike the trails out there. You can forage or bird watch or just enjoy the beautiful sunset from their porch. I'm very excited to check it out myself, and they'll even let you do a cookout with Animus beef. Order your beef or your next vacation at animusbeef.com. That's OHNEMUS beef.com.
And we're back here on FaithWorks Live. Joel Kurtinitis is my guest. I'm not going to give him any more introductions because he said I used too many adjectives last time. He's gone from volunteer to campaign strategist to
pieces of the chaos. Yes.
He knows he's been around this a time or two. He's gone a few rounds. We've talked quite a bit about Donald Trump because he is still number one in every single poll. He's still a lot of people's number one choice. There are many Iowans, however, many of whom voted for Donald Trump once or twice at least, and are now saying, yeah, but let's see what else is out there. Let's see if we can do any better than running essentially the same candidate three times. It didn't work last time. And maybe they're just thinking he was a good man for that time, but it's a different time now. And they're looking at the unique challenges that are out there. And that's their right to do. That's one of the things that we love, is that we actually get to make these choices. That's what the caucus process is so genius. I absolutely love it. But let's look at some of the other people that are vying to be essentially standing next to Trump, although he may apparently not be on the debate stage, which is a little difficult. It just makes this one different. But often you would say, we'll see in the debates, who's going to be the one to rise above everybody else, and they tend to duke it out on the debate stage. And I've seen that play out in living color when there were more candidates than there was space on the stage. So they had to do like two sets of debate. It was crazy. There's a lot of good that comes from that. As a voter, I come away with knowing who's going to be the real fighter, knowing who's ready to be the commander in chief and to be the one that's going to fight for my values, and who's just not. So I really do hope that Donald Trump participates fully in the process. He has said he's leaving it up in the air. But what do you think about the rest of the field as it sits? We can start with Ron DeSantis if you like, because I know you're paying attention to what he's doing, but we'll also mention everybody else that seems to be a factor in the race at this point.
Yeah, and just to back up to the debates for a second, I think that I don't think he'll be able to help himself. The debates, and anytime there's a spotlight and a microphone involved, that's where he's the strongest. I mean, he's not a strategist. He's not, potentially, he's not really a policy guy. And so that's where he shines. And I think he knows it. And I think the people around him know it. I think this is for drama. I just don't think he's a guy who can stand to be out of the spotlight for long. So we'll see how that plays out. Now, DeSantis, I can attest to the fact that he has a remarkable ground game, especially this early. I'm hearing reports from all over, even rural Iowa, way back down the dusty gravel roads, of people who are getting door knockers already, and not just mailers, but that personal contact multiple times, which sign of a strong ground game. And a lot of people don't know or don't remember that the Iowa caucuses it's a very involved, very personal, very investment heavy event compared to a primary. This is not a situation where people just go drop a ballot in a box like a primary. This is different. The caucuses are different, and it requires time and investment and commitment at the community level. And so a lot of success here, no matter how magnetic a candidate you are, you have to have that ground game. And so What I have seen is a lot of investment from Team DeSantis in developing and building out that structure, which is local networks of conservative leaders and volunteers that are building that community together. I've seen him build a really strong ground game. Iowa's 99 counties. He's committed to visit all 99 of them. That is a really heavy lift for anyone. It's a lot of driving. Been around for a couple of those trips, and it is an awful lot of driving. It's tough on a campaign schedule, tough on a staff. But if he can pull that off, there is also a payoff to it. As Iowans get to know him, I think the feedback's gonna get better, because honestly, there's a lot of similarities between his governing style in Florida and what Kim Reynolds is doing here.
They're kind of peas in the pod.
Yeah.
It's a mutual admiration society, although she is not endorsed, and she said she was going to remain neutral. He's had nothing but high praise for her, and they've done a lot of similar things. Great governors in the United States. And I have seen Casey DeSantis out quite a bit in Iowa. I know she scored a lot of points as far as the ladies and playing to that like suburban mom. It's smart because that's where Trump is the weakest, right? So when they bring out the young family and the young mom, and she obviously has an impressive story in her own right, surviving cancer and being a young mom and being a first lady and all those things. Now, Ron DeSantis often gets critiqued for not being a very charismatic or magnetic personality. I don't know if that's fair, if they're just comparing him to Donald Trump, who is just larger than life. But his argument isn't, I'm the funniest guy in the room. It's, I'm an effective leader, and I'm going to take on all the Goliaths that are out there trying to stomp on you and trying to destroy your nation and trying to steal your child and your freedom and get them off your back. I'm going to do it. That's basically his slogan. They are doing a lot of things right. We were volunteering at our county fair. DeSantis was the only one who had yard signs down there. And there were people that were asking about Trump signs. I'm like, I don't know. They didn't send them.
Yep.
And if there's enthusiasm, that can spread. But each candidate has to do the work. One of the things about the Trump campaign, he has a built-in advantage, but he actually has to put in the work. And if he's not willing to show up, and there have been some big events that early on Trump chose not to be here, and Iowans remember that. And so they're more willing, maybe he hasn't lost the crowd, but they're more willing to give heed to and give time to other candidates. Now, I wanted to give Ron DeSantis props for his, I thought he acquitted himself well in a recent NBC interview about abortion. Anyone that wants to be president needs to be willing to stand up for the preborn. If you can't guarantee the right to life, then I can't trust you to protect any of my other rights. And I thought he did a good job on that. And they brought the receipts for everything that he said about how Democrats want to abolish all limits on abortion. They're willing to abort a child up to the 9th month. And then NBC fact checked him and said, oh, there's no evidence of that. You're misrepresenting their position. And then the DeSantis team is like, well, here's 5 straight minutes of every Democrat and elected authority that said exactly what we said they said. So I thought that was very effective. That's something I care about as a values voter in the state of Iowa. I'm looking for that level of tenacity. I want the mic drop moments. I want someone that's willing to speak the truth boldly and not apologize for it and then back it up. So when they come at you, I want you to come back.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's something telling in there. There's a telling distinction between Team Trump and Team DeSantis as regards, staffing and the people surrounding them. You could see a marked difference right there. If you go back into the Trump drama, somebody fact checking Trump and saying the Twitter level response on this from, Don Trump Jr. or all of the Trump acolytes is pretty much just, you're stupid. That's pretty much the comeback is, yeah, well, you're dumb, or yeah, well, you like Joe, or
that's
whatever.
What Trump said. Well, you're a nasty person. That was kind of a mic drop moment for him, but it's a different level. It's a personal attack, and maybe people agree with it, and maybe we cheer because of, that's kind of how we were all feeling. He expressed our id in that moment, but it's not a thoughtful level of rebuttal as far as, here's what is, tanking our country right now, and here's what I'm going to do instead. So I guess it depends on, whether people are going to let their heart guide them, let their emotions guide them, or whether they're thinking about who's honestly going to do something for the direction of the country. I don't know. It's worth thinking about.
Yes, you can get the gotcha moment on his side of it, but you have to think about is that going to move anyone? And that's, I think, the relevant question is, if you have opportunities where the country is listening to you and you're going after votes, because again, this is not just a PR stunt. You have to win the presidency. You have to win on the strength of your vote. Statements like that probably do wonders to shore up his base. They do nothing to win over people in the middle. They do nothing to win over undecideds or people who just don't follow politics and they're just looking for, 5 minutes of publicity. that's not going to work to bring them over to your camp typically. There may be an electoral miscalculation going on there, but that's what I like also about DeSantis is that not just the man, but his team seems competent in putting together these sorts of fact-filled rebuttals. I loved what his Florida Surgeon General did in response to the CDC and the COVID mess, where they basically, again, brought receipts, came out, dumped all of the stuff that the CDC was covering up and just said, well, we've got our data and we're acting on it. You can do what you want. So I think that his governance in the state stacks up well against pretty much anybody. That's probably what I would be focusing on for messaging is I don't have to tell you what I'm going to do because it's what I have done.
Mm-hmm. Bring the record, bring the receipts. I like it. See you on the debate stage. The critiques that I've heard from Ron DeSantis, I'll just lay them out shortly and you can respond. A little bit lackluster in the personality department. We'll see. You got to give a guy a chance. It's again hard to compare him to the Donald. It's just a factor. And are people going to use that as part of their decision making? Maybe. I've also heard the critique, and I'm not sure I know quite where this is coming from, but the people that are saying he's the establishment pick, comparing him to Jeb Bush or to a Scott Walker, saying he's cozied up with the deep state, he's cozied up with big business, which is a little strange coming from the whole Disney thing, the fact that he pulled the rug out from under them in so many ways. And look at how Disney's doing it. They're hurting and they made their bed and they need to lay in it. But he was a big part of saying no more and standing up to them, which I really liked. So I don't really know exactly where that's coming from, but it is out there. So what do you think when you hear that?
Oh, goodness. This goes all the way back. I mean, this is one of the oldest attacks in the book. It's been used forever. The candidate's not responsible for who supports them. But what I'll also say is that I do think it's valid that a lot of people who hate Trump or sick of Trump or never Trump, whatever, they're going to look for anybody who's not Trump to get behind. There's going to be some of those. There's definitely some folks that are more on the moderate side. And a lot of them are, frankly, looking for a meal ticket, too, because we're talking about political consultants and professionals. There's an industry involving thousands and thousands and thousands of people that hop from candidate to candidate. So that's something
I know a few of those.
Right. And so there's a lot of that's going to happen. What I would also say, though, is if you want to go down donor lists, that's a battle that nobody's going to win. I can point you in the direction of dozens or hundreds, squishy moderate Republicans who do back Trump because they think he's going to win. And so they're on that gravy train. And so I don't think anybody wins. I don't think that's a persuasive argument from where I'm at because one, the candidate's not responsible for who supports them. And two, that's a mudflinging contest that nobody's going to win because those donor lists are sloppy across the board.
Sure. I'm thinking about Ron DeSantis. I do think he's an effective governor. Now, there are people who are saying, well, he's a great governor, but he's not ready to be president. And I hear that among Trump supporters a lot. I'm like, well, what defines the two? Because Donald Trump was president, but he's not anymore. And he lost last time. Chicanery notwithstanding. The question is, if Ron DeSantis is the clear leader in terms of someone with a record and someone who's willing to take it to the media and to take it to, the Disney corporations, all the woke left, he's really made he's stood with Moms for Liberty time and time again. He's fighting for the kids. He's fighting on life, fought for freedom in, COVIDistan. People are fleeing the oppressive blue states to come to Florida. That's a wonderful record. Why isn't he running away with a non-Trump vote?
At this point, again, it's early. I think people are still kind of feeling out all of their options. Not everybody knows. I mean, name recognition is a huge thing. And just because, if you're somebody who is a Republican voter here in Iowa or a Republican caucus goer, you might not be somebody who watches Fox News on a loop. You might not be somebody who listens to the Daily Wire every day.
Might actually have a life.
Right. So there's different levels, right? And so what typically happens is that out of those likely caucus goers, you're going to get different levels of engagement. And then all of those engagement levels start to rise when we get closer to caucus day. I would expect those things to expand. I think there's also people just waiting for the action to take place, right? Get in the debates. There's going to be punches. Some people are going to slip. There's several that face planted pretty hard during the Tucker Carlson interviews at the Family Leadership Summit, because at least in Iowa, there's an amount of personal investment in a given candidate that frankly makes people afraid to commit early on. And that's part of my pitch to people to do that is it gets a little bit difficult because what if I support this guy and then he says something really stupid? There is that because
you feel like you got dumped.
Right. And so there's that level of investment where I can definitely understand the desire to kind of hang back from it or say, well, I like all three of these people. We'll see what shakes out. I do think that's going to change fairly rapidly over the next maybe 6 weeks. I think we're going to start to see some more consolidation. Which direction that's going to be, I have no idea. But why he hasn't consolidated the non-Trump vote yet, I think we just have to wait to see who else rises, the other factors. A lot of people are just keeping their powder dry at this point.
Mm-hmm. That's true. We've seen it before. There is this message of inevitability with the Trump camp, which I just resist. I'm a contrarian, and you know that, but just I don't like people telling me my decisions. Like, the choice is over. The choice is obvious. I'm like, it's my choice. I get to make it. Yet I will be the judge of that, sir. Let the best man win. We shall see. I do hope that he's on the debate stage and that we'll get it. It'll be a good show. Get the popcorn ready now, folks. Aside from Team DeSantis, I'm seeing a lot of interest in Vivek Ramaswamy, and he is very present in Iowa. So Ron DeSantis is out making the rounds, and you really do have to be here in Iowa, which is challenging for candidates because they also have to campaign everywhere else at that time, which is why you see a lot of people starting to throw money into video ads. Vivek Ramaswamy seems to be an awful lot of interest. He's intriguing a lot of people, and he's very present right now. What do you think of him?
I think he's terrific. He's got excellent messaging, limited government points that speak to my libertarian heart. I sat in on a call with him, question and answer, kind of a public town hall. He brought up unprompted. So, there's opportunity to ask questions, right? And I had planned to ask the question that I have stumped most presidential candidates with here in Iowa, as I've had the opportunity to meet them over the years, which is a question that just never gets brought up because it's not a hot button issue, but it's the balance of federal powers. How do we rebalance the federal powers? The presidency's out of control. Congress is helpless, and we're, approaching an imperial presidency at this point. So how do we get that back? And typically I get, really surprised, confused, semi-confused pat answers. I didn't get the chance to ask that because he launched into it preemptively for the first time since Ron Paul. Honestly, he was the first person to ever bring this up preemptively and say, we need to get Congress back in control. We need to put the presidency back in its box. I thought that was terrific. I mean, I think that's a message that resonates here with a lot of folks, as well as just emphasizing simple truths that can be, put together on Twitter. Well, on the X formerly known as Twitter. But I think that resonates with a lot of folks. Now, what I've seen from him strategically, I don't think he has the resources or the ground game, at least at this point. But what I do see is that he is, and obviously he's young, he's smart, he's got a lot of technological expertise around him, he's got a lot of experience with being a CEO. I've seen that play out within his campaign with kind of pinpoint precision. So he can't be everywhere. He may not be able to bombard the mailers or the airwaves. He may not have the volunteer support, but he knows where he should be, and he's there. When the heartbeat bill was getting debated, he was the only person who was running around Iowa making noise at that time in support of that and around it, adjacent to it, I guess is the best way to put it. And so he has very good intuition with where to be to engage Iowa conservatives. He may surprise a lot of people with his final standing in the caucuses if he keeps it up.
I'm impressed with his specificity. Obviously, he's an erudite guy. He gets up there and he's one of the best speakers that I've seen. He's very intelligent, and he's done so much research, which you can tell. And he's such a young guy too. And so that kind of makes it more impressive. He has that charisma that maybe someone like a DeSantis kind of wishes that he had a little bit more of that. But, God makes us all for our own special purposes with our own strengths. It's true. So you just have to kind of stack up everybody's strengths and weaknesses and figure out what that is. I was very impressed with his conversation with Glenn Beck at the summit. He was very specific with how he would essentially drain the swamp, with how he would reduce down all the federal bureaucracy overreach. And he said, here's where they failed last time, because Trump had tried to do a lot of that. And he got pushback from the courts. He got stymied from a lot of the folks that are in those, that were Obama appointees in those positions that were actively trying to undermine him so much. He didn't get an awful lot of his promised draining done. And Vivek had a whole strategy. He's like, this is how we're going to get around that, because here's what the court said. He's read it. He's like, here's what we can do, because this is how it applies. We can cut 70% of the bureaucracies of all these different departments. And he's being very specific. I'm like, that's brilliant. Yes, let's do that. So I think he's catching a lot of people's eye with good reason. He's also reaching out to the Christian audience, which, given some of his family background, now I haven't had an in-depth theological conversation with him. He talks a lot about faith. He talks a lot about God. He's being willing to quote Blaise Pascal with me the last time we spoke, which was pretty cool. But I know some of his background makes me want to ask more specific questions about what do you mean by all of those terms. But he is courting a Christian audience, which I find so intriguing and very interesting. So he's a surprise. He's a pleasant surprise for an awful lot of people. Moving from him to someone that I think is perhaps a more natural fit who speaks the language of the conservatives is Tim Scott. They want to like it. They're very impressed with his story. He has an impressive personal story, and he knows how to speak the language of the Christian conservative in the Midwest. And obviously he's from South Carolina. So I'm going to assume that there's a lot of overlap, that we're the same type of people. He uses a lot of Bible references. He talks a lot about his story, about his grandfather was a former slave on a cotton plantation, the Jim Crow South, his parents getting raised up through hardship, and now he's in the Senate. It's impressive. My husband is like, yeah, but I'm tired of hearing the story. So he's like, I want to know what you're going to do. And I think that's fair as well. So it's all part of, again, getting to know who this person is, because a lot of people are still finding out about who you are. They want to know that spiel. But then the question is, do you have what it takes, especially as a senator, right, as a legislator, as opposed to an executive? Do you have the specificity it's going to take? Now, there were times when I thought some of the answers he gave to Tucker Carlson, for example, were a little bit slogany, saying a lot of the right things, and he was getting the audience kind of fired up sometimes, but then he would sort of stumble on like foreign policy questions, things about Ukraine, I wonder what your take is on him. I'm seeing him a lot in the state. I'm hearing his ads a lot. He's speaking the right things. He said he had a great ad on how our rights are inerrant. They come from God and not government. And he's literally in a church building at the time that he's saying that. So it's very clear. He's putting it all out on the table, but that's the type of guy that he is. How do you think it's playing in Iowa?
So he is up in the polls right now. So I think he is seeing a bump based on a lot of that good messaging that you're talking about. I think where he's going to encounter some difficulty, and it's not unique to him, I think it's him, it's Pence, it's Haley, is that there is a split right now down the middle of the primary electorate when it comes to a certain portion of our candidates being known quantities. Trump is never a known quantity. The man could be in office for 50 years and still not be a known quantity because he could wake up tomorrow and drop a bomb somewhere for no reason. Well, his unpredictability is, to a point, his strength. And then at the same time, you've got DeSantis, who's new entering this. I mean, he's not new on the national scene, but he's definitely new here. Iowans are not entirely familiar with him, so we're getting to know him. Vivek, absolutely. He's new, shiny. Nobody had really heard of him before this cycle. So you've got the novelty there, which used to be a fairly minor factor. But since Trump, because Trump was the first, it's gotten a lot more attractive to folks to not have that known quantity because I think especially in Iowa, again, we're jaded here, but we've heard all these things before. And so I feel like Tim Scott in particular, what I would say about him, as well as, a lot of folks, right guy, wrong time. There just seems to be that I do not know that the message that he is sharing, I don't feel like it carries the weight and the tonality of the crisis that we're in as a country. And, that's a conscious choice for messaging, for it to be hopeful and inspirational. A lot of candidates go that way. I respect it, but I don't know, when people are talking about, will I still be able to, will I retain my free speech? Are we going to have forced pronoun use here in the next 4 years? Are we going to have an assault weapons ban? Are we all these things that seem to be pressing right around the corner, online censorship, all these major issues. It's great that you have that wonderful heritage. It's great that you see land of opportunity in America. Amen. Yes. And amen to that. And you would make a great preacher. But as far as the presidency goes, I don't know if people are ready to leverage that message into confidence that he can fill the need that we have in front of us.
Yeah. Does he have the urgency that the time calls for?
Right. And then also, minor point, but we do see a lot of ads from Tim Scott. Knowing where he stands in the polls right now, I'd be a little bit surprised if the money to fund those ads was not coming from the ground game. In other words, banking on the media presence instead of the volunteer and door-to-door presence doesn't typically work as well in Iowa as it would in a primary state.
That's interesting. He, for a long time, and maybe just because I've been targeted by specific ads, like Google's like, you will like this ad. This is you. Like, oh, kind of, but I don't like labels. Thank you, Google. But now I'm seeing a lot more ads from Nikki Haley. a lot more of the same ad from Nikki Haley, if I'm being quite honest. And I don't know if that's going to have the impact that she hopes that it does. It's clear that she has money from somewhere because she's using it. And you gotta, right? I mean, there's all these different strategies for campaigns. I'm hearing, and her ads are completely different. So if you watch a Tim Scott ad, it's all about himself as the person. It's about his story. It's about hope. It's about, America's still the land of opportunity and we get our rights from God and not government. And we need to live out our faith and our values. And Nikki Haley, it's all about what she did at the UN. I'm going to put China on the ash heap of history. It's all foreign policy. It's very little in terms of like the touchy-feely stuff or the values. There is one ad where it talks about her being smart as a whip. And I'm like, I don't know that you can say that about yourself.
I know. It's so cringy.
Just as a quibble here, like you're not allowed to say that about yourself. I know one guy that I absolutely respect, and he was very smart, but he called himself on his website an emerging American mind. Like, you can't say that about yourself. Other people can say that about you.
Now, see, people who want to say things like that, what you actually should do is come on Faithworks Live and then let Rebecca do your intros, because then you'll get all the titles you didn't even know you had will start popping up. So
that's what I do.
Yes.
I get the checks in the mail. But so the Nikki Haley thing, it's a little off-putting to me when I see the ad, and I don't know why it is. I think it's just because I'm seeing her say the same thing with the same rehearsed intonation. China will end up on the ash heap of history. It's every time. It seems very practiced. And maybe that's just the clip that they chose. Maybe it's a little awkward for that reason. It seems performative to me. And it's also not hitting at issues that I care a lot about. Like, yes, do I think that's important? Yes. Is that a heart issue? I will die on this hill. What China's doing, like, no, that's really far away from me. That's not something, frankly, that's going to motivate me to vote for you versus somebody else. I'm glad that you have the gravitas of foreign policy. I think we're in a more existential moment in America. I'm caring about what's happening here in America and less so about China. That's me. Maybe that's, moving for other people. I was just less than impressed by that. What are your thoughts?
So Nikki Haley is one of the "It's My Turn Now" candidates who I don't think is with us in the present age. I think she's campaigning in 2008 and doesn't know it. If it were 2008 and, she was up against John McCain and people, the Republican market was there for foreign policy belligerence, then sure, she might get up to, 15%. But I think that she's completely misreading the audience at this point in time. We are one stray bomb away from World War III in Ukraine right now. A lot of the people that she's asking to vote for her have young children. We're not interested in World War III. That's not something we want to do. Honestly, the referendum on this was Donald Trump himself, who got into office for the first time, did not start any new wars, and managed to draw down our military presence all over the place and promote good relations with countries that were sworn enemies before. So, and some that still are, clearly. I just don't think the market is there for her message at all. It seems like you're talking about, very rehearsed. It almost seems like, I hate to be cynical, forgive me if you're a Nikki Haley fan, but it seems like a vanity project for her.
Because what else are you going to do? Right.
Well, right.
There are some politics. Well, I guess that would most appropriately be said for Asa Hutchinson. Like, what else am I going to do? So maybe
that's just retirement. Give the guy a break. It's this or fishing. Come on.
I had like $5 million. What else am I going to do?
Yeah.
Now, I do think Nikki Haley is smart, and I do think that she would be an asset in a lot of leadership roles. So one of the strengths that I saw at the summit was that she had a track record of kicking out bad leaders from leadership positions. And she seemed to have no time for, the grandfathering in of incompetence. And so I thought she was really strong on that. She has strengths as a candidate. She doesn't move me because she's not speaking to the things that I care the most about, that I think are most pressing and most central at this time. So I think I would agree with your analysis. It is so strange too, because she was a Trump appointee. She worked with Trump, and you've got Mike Pence, who's, again, vice president, running against his former boss, which I don't know how many times we've seen that in the past. I know Teddy Roosevelt threw a crimp at a lot of people's plans because he created the Bull Moose Party, like, out of nowhere, and just fascinating politics for history. But other than that, I don't know that we've seen this dynamic where you have a former president running for president again against people that were in his administration, worked closely with him, Mike Pence. I think my take on it is that he's a fundamentally decent guy, but he's in no man's land because the people that love Trump have Trump. And the things he could take credit for under a Trump administration, because he was on the team, Trump's going to take credit for that. No matter what. And that's probably how it's always going to be. And the people that really don't like him because he severed himself from Trump in a big way. I mean, he's got an awful lot of enemies. And I don't know that there's enough people that are in the friend zone that can bring him into that. I just don't see the path forward for him.
Yeah, I don't think there's much of one either. I think you described it well, but I also think that once again, he's just not reading the room in terms of what's at stake and where we're at as a nation. There was a time where Pence was one of the leading candidates within the conservative movement, that people were prospective candidates, I'll say. Back a couple cycles ago, his name was talked about a lot, right alongside, Rick Santorum and the others that were thrown out as possible conservative saviors. I think that has gone by the wayside now. And so trying to reclaim, mad respect for the guy personally. He seems like a very decent guy, very charactered, man of conviction. I think he face planted pretty hard with it's not, the not my problem. American city's not my problem. He said to Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, it's not my concern.
Not my concern. And so I think that's a tough thing to recover from just on a purely, messaging level. You're going to have that hung over your head if you ever do make it to major debates. That's going to continue to be hung over his head. But everybody slips up. So I think the bigger problem with him is more exactly what you said. How do you run on Trump's accomplishments while distancing yourself from Trump? I think you're probably seeing right now where he's polling is probably the percentage of people that are open to that message. And I don't expect that to change.
Well, I love the idea. Hypothetically, I love the idea of restoring decency to politics and respect. And we need to operate at a higher level, especially as the people of God. I have said many of those same things. He was the only one really to bring up the idea of the Constitution in that summit, which I found fascinating, bewildering, and a little saddening in so many ways, because maybe Tim Scott did a little bit now that I think about it, but that used to be our prime directive. Right, was we need to restore America. And I know that's a message that hits home for you too. We've changed so much. And I don't know how much of that is COVID. I don't know how much of that is, Trump and now Joe Biden and like the rise of the Uber executive. The tyranny is real. And we should be talking about going back to the Constitution in a lot of ways, but it almost feels like that's a pipe dream for a lot of people. And I think that's why you see tandemly, which is a whole different conversation, the rise of Convention of the States. Are we up for a second founding? Is this going to be Civil War kind of territory? Like there's a lot of these big hypothetical conversations that seem all too possible in this day and age. So I don't know. I do think we need to get back to the Constitution. Again, that's where I still, like Pollyanna over here with my silver lining. I'm just holding out hope that maybe someday. But it is a mark of the time that we're in.
Well, and he's got one more.
That doesn't land anymore.
Yeah. And he's got one more thing against him, trying to fold together that evangelical vote. And that is, we have long memories on the evangelical side. As governor of Indiana, given the opportunity to defend the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, he tucked tail and ran. And that's not something, again, you've got on one side, you've got Donald Trump, warrior king over here, who's like, I'm going to, charge at CNN for you. On a side-by-side comparison, if you want to be the guy, Mike Pence, you can't tuck tail on RFRA. You can't do that. And so that's the type of thing also that, okay, I like what you're saying. Given the opportunity as governor, you didn't actually do it. So what confidence do I have that you're going to do it as president? Yeah.
And I've heard him ask that in Q&As. And in some ways, it's all about what have you done for me lately? But in other ways, if people disappoint you, they're elephants. Republicans, hello, we remember that forever. And he has had to address that. He has a rebuttal to that, which is basically that what was in the media wasn't accurate. And that when I came in, I asked for a rewording of things, and I came into the legislature and I led on that, and I made sure that we had the protections, but it was reworded appropriately, and we're not going to give up. So I don't know what all the facts are in his version of things. I have heard that, but I do find it fascinating that there are people that that's the thing they remember about him, and also now January 6th. So
again, it wouldn't be as big a deal if the numbers weren't so tight. But for him to have any path to victory, that's his starting point. That's got to be his starting block. And if you can't nail those down, there's no chance.
It's going to make the debates pretty interesting. Again, I am kind of with you. I think that no matter how much Trump blusters about not needing to be in the debate, I don't know that he'll be able to resist, because I think he honestly loves it. He loves the drama of it. And so do we. As American people, like, we just want to see what's going to happen. We're over here with our popcorn. We got nothing better to do on a Tuesday night. It's going to be epic. Is there anybody else that I have left out of the discussion at this point? Doug Burnham, don't know too much about him. Apparently he's made the debate stage, which is pretty interesting. And Chris Christie, I think, deserves no airtime. There is no love lost between myself and Chris Christie. He knows why. But all that being said, what else are you looking for, or you think Iowans are looking for, that will be big factors moving forward?
So I think there's two parts to what needs to be established here by candidates, and candidates at the state fair. This is your chance. What I think conservatives are after at this point is courage and a plan. You show those two things, you've got a good chance, because we've seen success culturally by people who have those two things. I would argue that Governor DeSantis has shown that in Florida. I think Kim Reynolds has shown that here. It's not just bluster. It's not just attack and, keep wheeling zingers at the left. It is, we have a meticulous plan of how we're going to implement our policies with our majorities, and here's how we're going to do it, and we're not going to let anything stop us. Mm-hmm. You've seen that culturally, where companies like the Daily Wire are out there forming new companies to combat kind of the woke companies on the left. There has to be a plan to go with your courage. And so I think if you're showing courage without a plan, I think there's going to be questions asked that are legitimate by the electorate. If you're showing a plan, but you don't have the courage to back it up, there's going to be a problem. You marry those two things, let Iowans see that in your campaign and in your rhetoric. I think that's going to go a long way.
Now we're talking. Joel Kurtinitis, our special guest, a caucus analyst. There's another adjective for the roundup. I appreciate it, bud. Thanks so
Grand
much.
Poobah.
I am your highness, and that is all we need to know. I don't need to prove anything. You just need to, it's my truth, and you have to
believe me.
Believe me. Oh man, it's going to be fun to watch. If we have a country at the end of this, it's going to be a good thing. But see, that's the thing, is we're ambassadors for a heavenly kingdom. So, I mean, as much as we care, and I believe with all my heart and soul that we should be working for the freedom and the future and the prosperity of our nation, the greatness that has been founded and fostered and fought for. At the same time, I also know the sovereign king of all kings, and that he will never be defeated, and he's never surprised by election outcomes, and that all of these things are working together for our good and his glory. If we're working alongside that, if we're asking the right questions, if we're growing in the right process, we're fighting for the right things, we're standing up boldly, and as his people, we refuse not only to be deceived, but we're also the voices of truth in a confused and deceived age. I think that's where we have to speak up. We have to use the prophetic voice that he has given us through his word. We have to be different, where we are respectful, sure, but we are relentless about speaking the truth. And now is our time. I'm so glad you're listening. Let us know what you think as well. Check us out on Facebook, Faith Works Live there, YouTube, if we haven't been canceled yet. Love to hear your thoughts. Let us know what you're thinking, especially if you're a fellow Iowan and you're participating in the caucuses. We'd love to hear what you think. And until next time, our mission is to love God, serve people, and live free. Thanks for listening to Faith Works Live.